Good evening. My name is Jade, and thank you for joining us for tonight's very exciting and relevant webinar, Building Resilience in Times of Adversity. Periods of prolonged stress and anxiety will not only affect our emotions and behavior, but also manifest physically in the body. This can have an impact on our immune system, create tension, and over time, potentially lead to chronic illness. And so it is crucial for us to learn how to identify personal triggers and have the tools on hand to help manage and work through stress and anxiety. With all of this in mind, we are so incredibly grateful to offer a wellness workshop led by qualified yoga instructor and life coach, Mariel Witmond. Following a high-powered, high-stress corporate career that left her unfulfilled, Mariel now shares her yoga practice, coaching, and nutritional expertise with her devoted students. Practicing Ashtanga and Vinyasa yoga around the world for over a decade, Mariel teaches a dynamic yet playful class that takes you out of your overactive mind and into a meditative flow, combining breath and movement through creative sequencing to the rhythm of fun, curated music playlists. I can personally vouch for Mariel's yoga classes and say that they have been somewhat of therapy to me over the past year. Each one is thoughtfully planned and delivered with so much love, skill, and kindness, leaving me feeling rejuvenated and connected, despite being alone in my living room. Tonight, we look forward to an insightful discussion on how the brain responds to stress and how our emotions live and manifest in the body. Mariel will explain the typical ways we tend to deal with our emotions, sharing coping strategies to help us find and maintain balance in the most challenging of circumstances. Mariel would be more than happy to answer any questions that crop up during the course of the talk, so please do type these into the Q&A box, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. And so, without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our guest and my dear friend. Mariel, thank you so much for your time this evening, and over to you.
Thank you for such a lovely introduction and for having me today. I'm really excited to be sharing my experience and what I've learned not only over the past year of adversity, but Jade briefly mentioned my what I like to call my past life. So I worked in the entertainment industry for about 11 years until I massively burnt out. And found the courage to leave the only thing that I ever really knew. And when I left that job, I found that I was quite sick. I ended up seeing a nutritionist, having all these studies done, and it resulted that I had gastritis, I had a thyroid problem, so I had hypothyroidism, something also known as Hashimoto's, and I had a 3-centimeter hernia in my esophagus, and I wasn't even 30 years old at the time. All of these things, as I talk you through today's webinar, very heavily stress-induced. I do believe that they were all caused by stress. And it has taken me since leaving that job and sort of doing the whole 360 into health and wellness, I've spent a lot of time. I mean, even prior to this, I spent 10 years in therapy. I am a huge believer in the power of yoga, of meditation, of coaching, and more than anything on just the importance of really understanding our bodies, really learning to connect with our bodies, with our minds, so that we can work with them in times of adversity rather than help them kind of get the best of us in the worst of times. So I'm going to quickly share my screen. So kickstarting things with our body, and I'm going to briefly talk you through our brain. I'm not an expert of the brain, but I do want to give you my very basic understanding of how the brain works, because there are a few things that I've come across and that I even mention in my yoga classes that I think are incredibly important for us, not only to know, but to keep reminding ourselves in moments of stress in particular. So as you look at the image on the left, I'll start with the prefrontal cortex. That is a really tough one to say fast. It can be called the control center of our brains because it helps to control our thoughts and our actions. The main job of the prefrontal cortex is to control our emotional responses to stress so that we don't get too stressed out. It's probably the most evolved part of our brain, and it communicates with the amygdala. Now, the amygdala is fascinating. It is about the size of a kidney bean, located in the center of our brain, and it's the brain structure that is essential for decoding our emotions. When somebody experiences a stressful event, the amygdala sends a distress signal to the hypothalamus. So the amygdala is usually the first one to pick up a stress response, a stressful environment. The hypothalamus, so this area of the brain also acts as like a command center connecting to the rest of the body through the autonomic nervous system. So it controls the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system with things like our heartbeat, our breathing. Now, the wiring is so efficient between the amygdala and the hypothalamus that it kickstarts our fight or flight reactions in the body. So, the stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline. And in a past life, when we were dealing with life or death situations all the time, these are incredible things that our body does without us even acknowledging. So the moment a stress signal happens, all of these things go on. But the trouble is that the amygdala has the ability to bypass the prefrontal cortex. So they've done studies on animals that show that in moments of stress, the prefrontal cortex can actually go offline. So that means that when the amygdala is sort of working on its own, a lot of our behaviors, a lot of our reactions to stressful situations are actually happening unconsciously. So as a result of evolution, many of our body's alarm circuits are grouped together within the amygdala. Information from external stimulus reaches the amygdala in two ways. It's either the short way, so it's fast but imprecise, or a long, slower but more precise route, which would be through the prefrontal cortex. These are the moments where if we could learn from how the mind works and give ourselves the opportunity to slow down the amygdala, then we can learn how to react in calmer ways to stressful environments and not allow it to completely dominate and take control of our whole system. Now, there's something called the amygdala hijack, which was coined by Daniel Goleman. He's a psychologist who wrote the book Emotional Intelligence: Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. The amygdala hijack is exactly this. It's when the amygdala hijacks a situation, a stressful situation, and you don't have the opportunity to really process and think through how you're going to react. With the amygdala hijack, something I wanted to share that I've shared in my classes before, and I think it's so interesting, is according to Harvard brain scientist Dr. Jill Bolt-Taylor, 90 seconds is all that it takes to identify an emotion and allow it to dissipate while you simply notice it. So the amygdala hijack is connected. Obviously, our thoughts create emotions within the body. Those emotions do not live within the body. They last for about 90 seconds. But what ends up happening is that we create stories in our head that keep us in this repetitive loop of that strong emotion. So in stressful situations, if you're at work, if you have a deadline, and all of these things are firing, you might be starting to feel certain emotions, but it's the story that you tell yourself over and over again, I'm not going to hit that deadline, I'm not going to hit that deadline, that just keeps you in that perpetual state of stress. Now, naturally, there are very important impacts, physical impacts on the body that we need to be aware of when we don't know how to handle stress correctly. And all of this naturally ties into resilience, which I'll go into a little bit further. But when we are stressed, we tense our muscles. And if those muscles stay tensed for a long period of time, it can create problems within the body. We'll feel things like headaches, migraines, chronic pain. In the respiratory system, when you feel stress, you start to breathe very quickly. And for a lot of people, this can translate into panic attacks. And if you suffer from asthma or other breathing problems, you might actually find it quite hard to breathe. Elevated heart rate and blood pressure obviously leads to things like heart attack and stroke. It can affect your cholesterol, inflammatory system. The ones that really impacted me, so some people don't reabsorb the extra blood sugar that the liver pumps out. And obviously it does that to give us more energy so that we can react quickly. There's a few things that is really interesting about the fat storage and the blood sugar that is released into the body. If we don't turn that into energy, what happens in our day-to-day lives is that we're sitting for most of the time and we're stressed. We are in constant fight or flight, but we're not moving. So naturally, it can lead to things like obesity and other eating disorders. It can lead to type 2 diabetes. For me, and this is why it resonates so deeply, it can impact your thyroid and affect your ability to think clearly. I struggled with attention deficit for about 10 years. I was medicated for it. It was very hard for me to come off of, and naturally when I did was when I found out I had all of these other issues. And again, the same thing that happened to me was gastritis. So stress can lead to severe chronic pain and changes in your eating habits, and you can also develop things like acid reflux. So understanding how dangerous stress can be. Now, the past year for all of us has been challenging. You know, there's a beautiful quote that says, we're all in the same storm, we're just in different boats. So naturally, we've all been experiencing the last year to different degrees, but there's not a single one of us that hasn't been impacted by it in some shape or form. And as we look at the workplace, levels of burnout have reached an all-time high. We are struggling with being overworked. We are stressed because we don't have any idea of what the future holds. And I think what's been the most interesting thing about the past year is that everything that we possibly used to support ourselves, whether it was by ignoring how we feel, so escapism, or helping us to process, all of it's been taken away. So you can't go on holiday, you can't go meet friends, you can't socialize, connection, all of the things that we strive for. And what I would say that the last year has given us an opportunity for, and something that I hope this talk might inspire you to look into a little bit further, is the need for us to really look within. We're always looking for answers. We're always looking for things to make our lives better on the outside. And what we often fail to realize is that everything that we need to live happy and successful lives has to start from within. our health, our mental health, all of it. This is an opportunity for us to reconnect with ourselves, for us to get better acquainted with how our mind works and how it trips us up, and how to find different tools and abilities to be able to cope in really difficult situations. So the 90-second rule, which I mentioned previously, again, absolutely fascinating. What it asks you to do is anytime that you experience an emotion, the first thing to do is to identify the emotional reaction and then label it. So we really need to get acquainted with how our body responds to certain situations. Naturally, stressful situations often result in stressful thoughts. So all of it kind of goes full circle. But our ability to label how we are feeling allows us to better process what it is that we're going through. Because again, so much of what goes on in the mind kind of happens in autopilot, and we are very disconnected to how we feel underneath it all. So the 90-second rule, whenever you start to get, and it's usually physical reactions to a trigger. So if something triggers you, you'll notice, especially stress triggers, you'll notice that the heart rate starts to go up. Your palms start to get sweaty. You might start to get goosebumps on your skin. Those are all of the stress hormone reactions. But the moment that those things start to happen, it's important to stop and to take that moment and process what it is that you're going through. So label the emotion and then allow the feeling to come and go without judging it, without trying to change it. So this is what mindfulness is all about. It's our ability to slow down and to become witnesses of our behaviors, of our thoughts, of our emotions. And by being a witness, we can then learn to control them rather than allow them to control us. So what contributes to our negative patterns? And annoyingly, I wish I could see where the chat is, but because I'm sharing my screen, it doesn't come up. But if you guys want to type in the chat, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts. I'll get to them at the end of this. But what you think contributes to our negative thought patterns. I'll give you a moment maybe to type a few things. And let's see if I grab all of them. I might miss a few. But naturally, some of the things that contribute to these negative thought patterns are memories, right? There are conditioning, our upbringing, our experiences, our limiting beliefs, imposter syndrome, failure. So again, those experiences. And one of the ones that I think is so important for us to tune into is how we speak to ourselves. So we spend a lot of time in our heads, right? We spend a lot of time having conversations with ourselves. We play out conversations with other people. We talk about other people. There was an incredible Japanese scientist. I've again shared this with my community before. His name is Masaru Emoto, who performed some of the most fascinating experiments on the effect that words have on energy. He did this in the 1990s, and he did it with water. So he did two experiments. One, when frozen, water that's free of all impurities will create beautiful ice crystals that look exactly like snowflakes under a microscope. Water that's polluted or has additives will freeze without forming crystals. In his experiments, he put pure water into vials and labeled them with negative phrases. So he labeled one of them, "I hate you," or "fear." After 24 hours, the water was frozen and no longer crystallized under the microscope. It yielded gray, misshapen clumps instead of beautiful lace-like crystals. Now, in other vials of polluted water, after 24 hours, and on those he put, "I love you," he put peace, they produced beautiful, perfect hexagonal crystals. In the second test that he did, he took 2 cups of rice, of cooked white rice, and 2 separate mason jars and fixed lids in place, labeled one "thank you" and the other one "you fool." The jars were left in an elementary school, and the students were instructed to speak to these jars and to say the words that were on top of them. So to say "thank you" and to say "you fool." After 30 days, the rice in the jar that was constantly insulted, it shriveled into black, gelatinous mass. And then the other one, which said "thank you," remained white and fluffy, exactly the same as the day that it was made. So it's unbelievable to consider the power of words on like the energy that behind words and the impact that they have on water. Now, sound vibration travels through water 4 times faster than it does through open air. Remind yourself of that, and then also acknowledge that the human body consists over 70% of water. So when we speak to ourselves, when we are constantly giving ourselves those labels, "I hate you" or "you fool," those are the things, those are the thought patterns. They become repetitive thought patterns. We start to convince ourselves of their truth. And here's I'm sure I've got a lot of my students watching this right now, but the one thing I repeat in class all the time is the only difference between a belief and a thought is that a belief is a thought we've convinced ourselves to be true. So it is so important for us to be mindful of the language that we use when we talk to ourselves and the regular thought patterns that they create. Now, it's important, actually I'm going to go back here for a quick second before we go into emotional agility. It's important for us to recognize those negative thought patterns that we have within ourselves so that we can start to separate our identity with our thoughts. Quite often we assume that who we are the thoughts that we have, but who we essentially are is deeper than that, and who we are is a feeling that exists within us. So the more that we can start to separate ourselves from those mental patterns, the better equipped we become to be able to change those thought patterns if they aren't serving our greater good. Which moves us on to emotional intelligence and how can we apply it to our lives. So I'm going to read this quote here that you guys can see. Susan David wrote a book on emotional agility. I could not recommend it more. I really do. Yeah, I hope that you guys will read it because it's actually one of my all-time favorite books. But she writes, emotional agility is not about ignoring, fixing, fighting, or controlling, or anything else you might be experiencing. Rather, it's about accepting and noticing all of your emotions and thoughts, viewing even the most powerful of them with compassion and curiosity, and then choosing courage over comfort in order to do whatever you've determined is most important to you. Courage, once again, is not the absence of fear. Courage is fear walking. Let's go back to that full screen so you guys don't have to see the sides. So emotional agility is our ability to be aware and accepting of all of our emotions and even learning from the most difficult ones. How many of you watching this find that when you start to feel a negative emotion, your first instinct is, I need to push it down, or I need to distract myself with something else, or everything that's been taken away from us this year, I need to, I need to go out and have a drink. I'm going to go out and party. I need to plan that next holiday so that I don't think about everything that's going on right now. Unfortunately, when it comes to emotional agility, so much of what we've been programmed and conditioned to believe from childhood is that there are certain emotions that are good and there are certain emotions that are bad. And the bad ones we really don't want to feel often. And that is probably one of the worst things that we grow up learning, because the truth is, in order for us to know who we are in our entirety, we need to be able to experience the whole range of our emotions. So it means getting beyond our conditioned or pre-programmed cognitive and emotional responses to live in the moment with a clear reading of present circumstances, responding appropriately, and then acting in alignment with our deepest values. So emotional agility is choosing how we're going to respond to our emotional warning system. Emotional agility is something that will not only improve your quality of life, but it will teach you how to better engage with people around you. So in your work environment, in your personal relationships, the more that we can have compassion towards ourselves, the more that we can understand the full human experience, it will completely transform how you react to certain situations, in particular, how you are able to react to moments of adversity. So again, as we go back to all of those brain signals, it's the ability to take a moment to find that calm, to process what it is that you are feeling, to understand those feelings rather than reacting rashly. How many times, for example, has someone said something to you that triggered an insecurity or triggered your defenses and you explode? And that explosion comes out of nowhere. And after that explosion has happened, how many of you have felt shame? So that's something that I experienced often in my life. I'm a highly sensitive person. Being a highly sensitive person, let me say, is a superpower. But unfortunately, when you're highly sensitive, and especially when you're a child, people's reaction to you is, oh, you take everything so personally. Don't take everything so personally. Don't be so sensitive. Don't be so that was always the message that I got growing up. But I'm like starting to go off on a tangent. Bringing it back to emotional agility, I think it's important for us to be able to register how it is that we are feeling, to be able to slow down the natural mechanics of our brain so that we can respond in a way that's in alignment with who we want to be, rather than those reactions that are outlandish, those reactions that make us feel shame for who we are, when in reality, it's not shame for who we are, it's just a complete disconnect with our authentic selves. So what are some of the ways that we can positively impact how we think and feel? There is, I know some of you guys were writing messages. This is one of the first times that I've shared my screen in this way, and I actually feel a little bit out of control. But I'm going to ask you guys again to consider what are some of the ways that you think, ways to positively impact how we think and feel. So if you have the chat box there, I'd just love to hear your thoughts. Obviously, I'm going to share some of the research that I've come across. And some of this is obvious, right? And some of it we've spoken about, our, emotional agility, how we connect to how we feel. So some of the main examples that I wanted to give for ways in which we can positively impact how we think and feel. I'm sure most of you have come across the term a growth mindset. So to have a growth mindset is to believe that our most basic abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. That personal qualities like intellect and natural talent are just the starting point. So there's a fixed mindset that believes, you have to be born with talent. You have to, you can't grow. And then there's the growth mindset. If you are a parent watching this next example is such a hard one to stomach, but it goes to show how easy it is for us to be programmed as children ourselves, but also how easy it is for us to program our children in the wrong way. So here are two examples of the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. A parent who praises their child's accomplishment by saying, "You studied hard. Well done for working towards that goal, that grade that you got." That displays a growth mindset. Now, the parent who says, "Yes, child, you got an A, you're a genius." It's so natural to say, right? "Well done, you're so smart." But it creates a fixed mindset. It creates that mindset that you can't work towards something, you have to be that something. So having a growth mindset really positively impacts how we think and feel, because it is that belief that we have basic abilities, but that we can develop those abilities. It means that we still have control, and that we can still impact positive change in our lives by having that growth mindset. Now, another way to positively impact how we think and feel is our silver linings. So a lot of us tend to dwell on things that have gone wrong in our lives, right? It's so much easier when you're talking to friends to talk about the negative things than it is to talk about all of the great things that are going on in our lives. So as opposed to thinking about what you did wrong, which may lead to further negative thinking, you could think about what you could do differently and perhaps better the next time. So it's, this can cascade into positive and hopeful thinking rather than dwelling on everything that you did wrong. So again, in work environments, there's always going to be times, work or otherwise, where we don't do things right. And if you are a perfectionist or a people pleaser like me, we can take that really, really to heart. We can really struggle with having done something wrong, and we will replay what we did wrong over and over and over in our heads. And again, these create those cyclical emotional feelings that we just can't get ourselves out of. And it's the way that we're speaking to ourselves. It's the way that we're perceiving the situation to be. So if we can train ourselves to shift that perspective, to look at the silver lining of things, it gives us an opportunity to see the bright side, even when things go wrong. I mean, this is a key element of optimism. And I know it's not to say that everything needs to be positive and beautiful, and that's, you got to be happy all the time. That's, again, we have to be able to feel everything. But the more in tune that we become with those emotions, the better we can navigate them and find the direction that we want to be taking, the direction that leads us to where it is that we want to go. One that I wanted to share with you guys now that I'd actually love if you have a piece of paper and a pen. I'd encourage you to do this little exercise. So reframing is our ability to shift focus from a cup half empty to a cup half full. So you re-examine your life story to see how heroic your acts were. You go back to an incident and you find strengths and you build self-esteem from that achievement. So with a piece of paper, I encourage you to write down, I have, I am, and I can. And these are going to be things that you hold on to in moments where you are so caught up in the negativity of the situation that you lose sight. So again, it's tying in the silver linings, it's tying in the growth mindset. I want you to write down everything that you have. So to give you an example, I have strong relationships, structure, rules at home, role models, external support systems, whatever it is that you have in your life. Take a moment, the ones that you really want to remind yourself of, and start to list what it is that you have. Now, just to be conscious of time, this is always something that you can work on later. The next one I want you to work on is I am. So all of the things associated with who you are. I am strong, I am powerful, I am inspiring, I am... What are the things that you need to remind yourself of? What are you good at? And then the last one, I can. What are all of the things that you can do? So hang on to that. And that's a project that I will leave you guys with. Because again, I think the more that we can tune into, and it's actually really funny, this necklace, I got it quite a few years ago now, but on the 3 corners, it says, I am, I can, I will. So for me, this is very much a mantra. I always have to remind myself of the things that I am capable of who I am as a person, of all that I have, because it's so easy to lose sight of that when we feel like we're struggling, when we feel like we're drowning. It's very easy to believe that that things aren't great, that we don't have a lot, that who am I to be able to do this, that, or the other. All right, so I've got all these notes and I seem to have completely messed up the order. But right now on this slide, what I wanted to share with you guys was obviously, there's a few things I wanted to share with you guys that I haven't shared, but anyways, we'll come back to it. Thomas Edison. So when we struggle in times of adversity, those times of adversity quite often might have something to do with your inability, how would I word this? With what you would interpret as failure. So a lot of times we put our heart and soul into things, but they don't always work out the way that we wanted to. I think something that I always have to remind myself in everything that I do is nothing in life is a failure if you are still learning. And I think that Thomas Edison is a prime example of this. His quote, "I have not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." According to legend, Thomas Edison made thousands of prototypes of the incandescent light bulb before he finally got it right. And since the prolific inventor was awarded more than 1,000 patents, it's easy to imagine him failing on a daily basis. So it's amazing because this is resilience, right? This is grit. This is when you feel connected to your why, when you have purpose in what you are doing, there is nothing there's nothing that allows you to fail. There are no setbacks. There are just stepping stones. There are just ways that teach you what doesn't work, things that teach you a different route that you can take. But resilience is our ability to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and keep going, no matter what life presents us with. And I hope that this quote does stay with you, because I know that a lot of us really do struggle with limiting beliefs, with imposter syndrome, with who am I to have these big dreams? And the reality is, who are you not to? I think all of us have a purpose, whether you have found it or not. And let me say, purpose and meaning are two separate things. But I think in order to find purpose and to have meaning in your life, it doesn't just land on your doorstep. It's something that you really do have to connect with from deep within. So as we look at how we create resilience, how we allow ourselves to stop allowing our mind to control our lives, but rather for us to control our thoughts, we have to learn how to slow down. We have to learn how to connect with ourselves. And we really have to put some of these practices into place. So there is a leading psychologist by the name of Martin Seligman, who explains how we deal with setbacks, how people that are resilient will deal with setbacks. And he has the 3 Ps, so permanence, pervasiveness, and personalization. So permanence is people who are optimistic and therefore have more resilience. They see the effects of bad events as temporary rather than permanent. So for example, they might say, my boss didn't like my work that I did on that project, rather than my boss never likes my work. Pervasiveness, resilient people don't let setbacks or bad events affect other unrelated areas of their lives. They might say, I'm not good at this, rather than I'm not good at anything. Again, it's the language that we use when we talk to ourselves about ourselves. And personalization. People who have resilience don't blame themselves when bad events occur. Instead, they see other people or circumstances as the cause. For instance, they might say, I didn't get the support I needed to finish that project successfully, rather than I messed that project up because I can't do my job. This is a big one, and I'm going to end with it in a moment, but when we look at how to be resilient in times of adversity, a really important reminder for all of us is not to allow ourselves to become victims. It's very easy for us to say, you know, all of these outside circumstances are impacting my reality, and it's their fault, and it's, you know, these are the reasons why I can't succeed in life. And unfortunately, allowing yourself to become the victim completely strips you of your power. Allowing yourself to be accountable allows you to take back that power. So owning your story, owning your part in any given situation is what allows us to take back control rather than live that story of victim and playing that victim mentality. Now, this last one here is another leading psychologist who talks about the 3 C's. So resilient people view challenge not as a paralyzing event. They don't look at their failures and mistakes. They do look at their failures and mistakes as lessons to be learned from and opportunities for growth. They don't view them as a negative reflection on themselves or on their abilities or their self-worth. Commitment. So resilient people are committed to their lives and their goals. They have compelling reasons to get out of bed in the morning. That's their purpose, their why. They commit to their relationships, to their friends, to causes that they care about. Personal control. Resilient people spend their time and energy focusing on situations and events that they have control over because they put their efforts where they have the most impact. They feel empowered and confident. So it's like that quote that I feel like was all over the place throughout the pandemic, but we can't control the things that happen to us. We can control how we respond to those things. So being able to focus on what we have control over and then letting go of what we don't, finding surrender. And surrender doesn't mean giving up. It's just being realistic to what we cannot control. Sorry, that's not the end. I'm just going to stop sharing for a second so that you guys can see my face and that I can actually see my notes. So what are ultimately, kind of taking things back full circle, what are some of the things that cause us stress? So habitual worry. How many worriers are watching this? Something super interesting about worry. There is a doctor called Chad Lejeune who talks about how worry cannot exist in the present moment. The reason being is that worry is our desire to control the future. It is all about the future. And his big thing is if we could stop looking at how we want to worry about the outcome of something, but rather care about it, then it changes how we deal with stress, right? Because we're not worrying about a situation, we're just reminding ourselves that we care about that situation. How many people imagine worst case scenarios? I think it was Brené Brown, that my favorite, that talked about how we imagine worst case scenarios because we believe that if we can imagine the worst case scenario, we can prepare ourselves for when it happens. But the truth is that nothing can prepare you for when a worst case scenario happens. So it goes back to worrying. It's counterproductive. It's us trying to control the future, which is not something that we can do. Things that cause us stress is when we can't find that middle ground. And I think, again, a lot of the things that we've talked about today, it's being flexible, right? It's about not seeing everything in black and white. It's about finding that middle ground. And that middle ground always exists in any situation. Tied to worry is that we overthink things. I would say that as a woman, I do believe that women perhaps overthink things a little bit more. We're known to overthink. We're also known to multitask, which is great. But the overthinking, we really have to catch ourselves because, again, that is what is keeping us in the amygdala hijack. And, you know, that's when we really need to practice the 90-second rule of stop overthinking, just allow yourself to sit and process the emotion. And let it go. Sit with it and then wash it out. Things that cause us stress are also our reaction to a challenge or to unexpected change. And my gosh, has that been the case in this last year? It's our inability to be able to take action, our inability to take control, that I think causes so much stress, because we just don't know what the future has in store for us at the moment. All of that said, and I gave you a few of these, again, with the challenge, commitment, control, and the permanence, pervasiveness, and personalization. But I wanted to quickly share with you guys some things that resilient people share. So resilient people are connected to their emotions and are self-aware. If this year has given you anything, I hope that it has given you the opportunity, or forced you to sit with yourself and to start to get to know yourself a little bit better. And if it hasn't, I hope that this serves as an opportunity for you to become more aware, for you to really learn to connect with your emotions. They don't listen to the negative voices in their head or the negative things that other people have to say. All of us have inner critics. And again, a lot of this stems from our conditioning, our upbringing. There was that one person that told you you weren't good at something, and it became a voice in your head. We need to learn, like our emotions, to identify those voices, to label those voices, and then to be able to communicate with those voices and say, you're not helping me right now, so go away. Resilient people bounce back. And I think that is such a wonderful trait, because the truth is we're all going to trip up at some point. We're all going to feel like we have failed. We are going to have days where we just don't want to show up. But resilience is showing up, even when you cannot control the outcome. Resilient people have a positive image of the future, a realistic one, but a positive one. So again, it's reframing. It's being able to look at your situation from a different perspective. If you are caught in that negative rut, go back to your I have, I am, I can, and remind yourself of just how amazing you are and everything that you do have going for you in your life. Resilient people have solid goals, and they have a deep desire to achieve those goals. They are empathetic and compassionate, however, and this is where we have to be careful. They don't waste their time worrying about what other people think about them. They maintain healthy relationships. They maintain healthy boundaries. They don't bow down to peer pressure. Resilient people never think of themselves as victims, so I touched on that already. They focus their time and energy on changing the things that they have control over. Here's another big one. They ask for help. How many of you out there feel like you've got to do it all on your own? That is a tendency, a high achiever tendency in many cases, and there is, it's the soloist. It's the person that feels that if they can't do it on their own, then they're a fraud. It's one of the personalities of imposter syndrome. Always lean on your support system, lean on your friends, on your family. Have the courage to ask for help. And accountability. This is our life, right? It's our story, our narrative. We hold the pen, and if you don't, then go get it. Take back that control. Really try to get yourself out of victim mentality and be your own hero. Write your own narrative. I realize that. I can now see your messages. Thank you guys so much for writing those through. I had a feeling that this was going to fly by because there's just so much to talk about. And I know that when they pitched this, I was going to share with you guys some breathing techniques and some meditations on how to handle stress when you encounter them. I don't have, unfortunately, the time to guide you through all of them, but my strong recommendations one of my favorite breath works, the ways of breathing when I experience stressful environments, is to do box breath. So box breath is inhaling for a certain count. Let's say we count for 4. So you would inhale 4, 3, 2, 1, and then hold your breath for a count of 4, 3, 2, 1. You would exhale for 4, 3, 2, 1, and hold your breath again. 4, 3, 2, 1. And then you'd repeat that cycle. So that's why it's like a box breath. But in those moments where you start to tune into the trigger, so we all know when we're starting to get riled up, when something has kind of hit a soft spot, allow yourself to feel that emotion and maybe take a moment and work through your box breath. So we're trying to slow the amygdala down so that the prefrontal cortex can actually kick into gear and process what is happening so that we don't react from conditioning, from our baggage, from our unconscious mind. You know, we want to be able to do things consciously. So I really do recommend that breathing technique. Another thing, and I was hoping to guide you guys through this, but I've been chatting for a while, but hopefully you found it useful. But a beautiful meditation that I'm sure you guys can find online, and if not, hit me up and I'll record one for you guys later. But it's to bring awareness to the parts of the body and squeeze that part. So like bring your awareness to your feet and then clench your feet, clench your feet, clench your feet, and then slowly release to let go. And then you would do the same thing with your calves, for example. You would tense the muscles and then slowly relax. And you work your way up the body. And what this is called is progressive muscle relaxation. So if you feel like you are struggling with stress, I would say take a moment and sit down or lie down, gently close your eyes and guide yourself through the body and just part by part for a count of 5, squeeze, 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 squeeze with all that you have, just that one part of the body, and then let it go. And what I think this also helps us do is it helps us connect with our body, right? It helps us to connect with those areas of the body. And by focusing on what we are doing, it keeps us rooted in the present moment. And when we are in the present moment, things like habitual worry, which is all about the future, they can't get to us and they can't trigger our stress responses in the same way. So we can learn to counter all of those things. We just need to slow down, to tune in, to really get to know ourselves a bit better, to become witnesses. And then in the future, it doesn't mean that it won't happen, but you'll start to get better at catching yourself, at noticing the signals, and then working with what feels right for you. Any of these sort of tools that I've left you with, it's a lot of information, I realize that. But I hope that you have found it helpful. I hope to a degree you've found it insightful. If you have any questions for me, oh, Sheena, hi. If you have any questions for me, please drop them in the Q&A box. I know we've kind of gone over time, so if there are questions, I'll try to answer them quickly. But otherwise, something I can do very quickly is I will leave you with my information. So if you want to email me, I talk about stressful triggers. My website is down. So if you do go to my website and you don't see it, it's because it's down, but I am learning to roll with the punches and I'm just taking it day by day, hopefully getting it back up. But please do follow me on Instagram, send me a message. I'd love to stay connected. And yeah, please know that no matter what it is that you're going through, you're not alone. These have been unprecedented times. I think we are being challenged in ways that we never have before, and all of our old ways of coping are no longer serving us. And I think this is a beautiful opportunity for us to change something that wasn't quite working, and to reconnect with yourself, to come home to yourself. And you will always find the answers that you are looking for on the inside. So take some time. And thank you so much for tuning in, for being here. And yeah, no questions. Guys, it's 7 o'clock. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Stay in touch. Thank you.